It was a bright Saturday morning in New York City. The tall glass buildings sparkled under the sunlight, and expensive cars moved slowly through the busy streets. At the very top of one of these towers was a huge penthouse, owned by one of the richest men in the city, Charles Whitford. He was a man who loved power and money more than anything else. People said he had built his fortune from nothing, but those who worked close to him knew he had stepped on many people to get to the top. He was admired by some, feared by many, and respected by few. That morning, Gloria Bennett arrived for her shift at the Grand Crest Hotel. She was wearing her neat, navy blue housekeeping uniform and carrying her cleaning cart. She had been working at this hotel for over 6 years, always polite to guests, always careful with her work. Gloria was in her early 40s with kind eyes and a calm nature. Most guests liked her because she never spoke too much, just smiled and did her job well. Today, she had been assigned to clean the penthouse suite. Normally, the hotel sent 2 people for this job, but her colleague had called in sick. Gloria didn't mind. She had cleaned the room before and knew how Charles liked things. She had no idea that today would change her life forever. The elevator opened directly into the suite. The smell of expensive cologne and fresh flowers filled the air. The living room looked like a palace, white marble floors, golden lamps, and large windows showing the whole city. Gloria quietly pushed her cart inside. She saw Charles sitting on the sofa, speaking loudly into his phone about some business deal. He barely noticed her. Gloria began her work, dusting the shelves and polishing the tables. She moved carefully, not wanting to disturb him. As she cleaned, she remembered the first time she had been in this room. Back then, she had felt nervous around such wealth, worried she might make a mistake. But now, she had learned to work quietly, invisible, like a shadow. She moved to the dining table where several crystal glasses were scattered from the night before. She picked them up one by one, placing them on her cart. Just as she turned to clean the glass coffee table, her hand slipped slightly. A small bottle of water tipped over, and a few drops rolled across the polished glass. Charles ended his phone call and turned toward her. His face was sharp, his voice cold. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked. Gloria quickly grabbed a cloth and wiped the table. "I'm sorry, sir," she said softly. "It was just a little water. I'll clean it right away." But Charles was not interested in her apology. He stood up, walked toward her, and looked her up and down with a look of disgust. "Do you even know how much this table costs? More than your salary for a whole year. People like you should be more careful. You're worthless trash if you can't even clean properly." The words felt like a slap. Gloria froze, her hands still holding the cloth. She wanted to say something, but her throat felt tight. She had been insulted before. Some guests didn't see hotel workers as human, but this one was different. His voice was filled with a kind of cruel confidence, as if he truly believed she was beneath him. She swallowed and kept cleaning. "I'll make sure everything is perfect, sir," she replied, her tone steady even though her heart was racing. Charles didn't respond. He simply walked back to his sofa, picked up his phone, and began another call, laughing loudly as if nothing had happened. Gloria finished cleaning the living room and moved to the bedroom. Her mind kept replaying his words. She was worthless, trash. No, she thought. She was a person who had worked hard all her life. She had raised her son alone after her husband left. She had cared for her sick mother for years. She had worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. She was many things, but she was not worthless. When she was younger, she had been an auditor at a well-known finance company. She had worn suits, sat in meetings, and dealt with millions of dollars on paper. She had been good at her job, but when her mother became ill, she had taken time off to care for her. The company replaced her without a second thought. After her mother passed away, Gloria struggled to find work in her field. Eventually, she took the housekeeping job to pay the bills. By the time she returned to the living room, Charles had left. The suite was silent. She continued cleaning the kitchen, wiping the counters, and putting away dishes. That was when she noticed something unusual. A leather folder lying open on the counter. Inside were printed documents, covered with numbers, charts, and signatures. She recognized the layout instantly. Financial statements. Her old skills as an auditor told her something was off. The figures didn't match. The transfers looked suspicious. She paused, holding the page just long enough to understand what she was seeing. Offshore accounts. Large sums moved quietly to unknown companies. It wasn't her business. She was just here to clean, but the details burned into her memory. Gloria placed the folder back exactly as she had found it and closed the kitchen. As she pushed her cart toward the elevator, she felt a mix of emotions: anger from his insult, sadness at how easily he dismissed her, and a strange, quiet fire building inside her. When she reached the staff floor, she clocked out and walked into the cool evening air. The city's noise wrapped around her, but her mind was far away. She remembered an old friend from her days in finance, a man who worked as an investigative journalist. She had helped him once on a case involving fraudulent accounts. He had always told her, "If you ever see something wrong, don't be afraid to speak up." That night, Gloria sat at her small kitchen table sipping tea. Her son was out with friends, and the apartment was silent. She thought about calling her friend, about telling him what she had seen. At first, she hesitated. Charles was powerful. Going against him could mean trouble. But then she heard his voice again in her mind. Worthless trash. She straightened, her back. No, she thought. She was not worthless. And maybe, just maybe, she had just seen the first crack in Charles Whitford's empire. She didn't know exactly what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. She would not stay silent. The sun rose slowly over the city the next morning, its light touching the tallest buildings first before spreading over the streets below. Gloria sat at her small kitchen table, staring at a half-eaten piece of toast. She wasn't really hungry. Her mind was still on what had happened the day before. Charles Whitford's words still echoed in her ears. She had faced rude guests before, but something about the way he had looked at her, the way he had spoken, had cut deep. It wasn't just an insult. It was as if he believed she had no value at all. But more than his words, she couldn't stop thinking about the folder she had seen in his kitchen. The numbers, the charts, the transfers, her years of experience in finance told her those documents weren't normal. She didn't need to take pictures. Her sharp memory had already stored every detail. The strange thing was, she had no reason to be in that part of his suite at all yesterday. If it hadn't been for the cleaning assignment and the spilled water, she might have missed it completely. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, letting her mind wander to a different time in her life. Years ago, Gloria had been a rising star at a respected finance firm. She had started as a junior auditor, carefully checking the numbers in clients' accounts, making sure every dollar was accounted for. Her managers had quickly noticed her talent. She had an ability to spot small mistakes, hidden transfers, unusual spending patterns that others missed. She had once helped uncover a $1.2 million fraud case, and the company had rewarded her with a promotion. Life had felt good then. She wore pressed suits, carried a leather briefcase, and felt proud of the work she did. But when her mother was diagnosed with a long-term illness, everything changed. Gloria became her full-time caregiver, spending days and nights at her bedside. She didn't regret it for a moment. Family came first, but her company didn't see it the same way. After months away, they told her they had filled her position. By the time her mother passed, Gloria found it nearly impossible to return to the corporate world. She applied for jobs, but her time away from work made her seem outdated to recruiters. Bills piled up, and she finally took the housekeeping job at the Grand Crest Hotel. It was honest work, and she did it well, But the corporate knowledge she carried stayed locked inside her mind. Until now. The sound of her phone vibrating pulled her back to the present. She looked at the screen and saw a familiar name, David Ross. She hadn't spoken to him in years. David was the investigative journalist she had worked with during her finance days. Back then, he had been chasing a major corruption story, and she had quietly guided him through understanding complex financial records. She hadn't told him about the folder yet, but maybe now was the time. She answered the call. "David? It's been a long time." "Gloria." David's voice was warm, surprised. "I was just thinking about you. I'm working on something. Big. But I could use the sharpest eyes I know. Are you still in finance?" She let out a small laugh. "Not exactly. I'm working at a hotel now." There was a pause on the other end. "Really? Well, that's unexpected. But knowing you, even in a hotel, you'd still notice things most people miss." His words made her smile faintly. "Funny you say that," she replied. "Yesterday, I saw something. And it's about someone you might want to know." She didn't give too many details over the phone. She knew better than to risk being overheard. But she mentioned the name Charles Whitford. She heard David's breath. "Catch. That name has been floating around," he said. "People have whispered about shady deals, but no one's had proof." "I might have seen that proof," Gloria said quietly. "Financial records, offshore accounts, big transfers that don't make sense." David's voice grew serious. "Gloria, if you're sure, this could be huge. But you know what you're getting into. He's powerful. People like him don't go down without a fight." "I know," she said firmly. "But he called me worthless trash yesterday. And maybe I can't change his mind about me. But I can show him what I'm really worth." They agreed to meet. Later that evening, at a small cafe far from the city center, a place where neither of them would be recognized. The rest of the day at the hotel was slow. Gloria went about her duties, cleaning rooms and greeting guests with her usual polite smile. But beneath that calm exterior, her mind was racing. She thought about how easily Charles had left those papers out. Was it arrogance, carelessness, or had he simply never imagined that someone like her could understand what she was seeing? When evening came, she changed out of her uniform and into a simple gray sweater and jeans. She took the subway to the cafe, a quiet spot with worn wooden tables and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. David was already there, wearing a dark jacket and a cautious expression. They hugged briefly before sitting down. Gloria told him everything. How she had been cleaning the suite, how she had seen the folder, and exactly what the documents contained. David listened without interrupting, scribbling notes in his small leather notebook. "You have a photographic memory for numbers, don't you?" he asked. Gloria nodded. "It's one of the few skills that never leaves you." David leaned forward. "If you're right about those accounts, it means tax evasion, fraud, and maybe even money laundering. It's not just a small scandal, it could bring his whole empire down." Gloria's eyes met his. "I don't want revenge, David. I just want the truth to be known. People like him think they can treat others however they want because their money protects them. But I know numbers don't lie." They made a plan. David would start digging through public records, company reports, and any previous investigations connected to Charles. Gloria would keep her eyes open at the hotel, looking for anything else that could confirm the pattern. As they left the cafe, the evening air was cool and sharp. Gloria felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She knew Charles was dangerous, in his own way. His money bought silence, loyalty, and sometimes fear. But she also knew something else. She had faced harder things in life than the wrath of a billionaire. That night, as she walked home under the streetlights, she felt lighter than she had in years. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a woman with knowledge, purpose, and a quiet plan. Far away in his penthouse, Charles Whitford poured himself a glass of wine, completely unaware that one of the people he had dismissed as worthless had just taken the first step toward shaking the foundations of his $2.4 billion empire. The next morning, Gloria woke up earlier than usual. The city outside was still quiet, with only the faint hum of buses and the occasional honk from a distant street. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, looking out at the rows of brick buildings across the street. Her mind was already busy, thinking about her meeting with David the night before. She had gone to bed feeling a mix of hope and nervousness. Hope, because she knew David was one of the few people who could take the information she had and turn it into something real. Nervousness, because she understood how powerful Charles Whitford was and how much he would fight to protect himself if he ever discovered what they were doing. At the hotel that day, Gloria went about her work as usual. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. She cleaned rooms, replaced towels, and greeted guests with her polite smile. But all the while, she kept an eye out for anything related to Charles. She knew that if she got access to more information, letters, receipts, computer screens left unlocked, it could help David connect the dots. Later in the afternoon, while she was vacuuming the hallway near the penthouse, she overheard two staff members talking. "Mr. Whitford is in a bad mood today," one of them whispered. "Something about a meeting with investors not going well." Gloria's ears perked up. Trouble with investors? That could be related to the documents she'd seen. She didn't say anything, just finished her work quietly. She knew it was best to act like she hadn't heard a thing. After her shift ended, she checked her phone. There was a message from David. "Meet me at the cafe tonight. I've found something you need to see." That evening, she made her way to the same small cafe as before. David was already there, his laptop open on the table and a serious look on his face. He greeted her warmly, but she could tell from his expression that what he had discovered was big. "I've been digging," he said as soon as she sat down. "You were right about the offshore accounts. I traced some of the company names from the documents you described. They're registered in tax haven countries, and most of them don't have real business activity. That's usually a sign they're shell companies set up to move money without attracting attention." Gloria listened carefully. She understood the terms well from her auditing days. "That's not all," David continued. "I also found a few old lawsuits involving Charles's companies. Most of them were settled quietly, but the details suggest patterns, false invoices, inflated project costs, even bribery. It's not just questionable business, it could be criminal." Gloria took a slow sip of her tea. "If this comes out, it could destroy him." David nodded. "That's why we have to be careful. People like him, they have lawyers, private, investigators, even friends in high places. We need enough evidence so that when the story breaks, it can't be silenced." Gloria thought for a moment. "I might be able to get more. Sometimes when I'm cleaning, I see letters or contracts left out. I can't take them, but I can remember the details." David smiled slightly. "That's your gift. Most people wouldn't even notice, but you've got the mind of an auditor. Every number, every name, it sticks." They talked for another hour, planning their next steps. David would start building a timeline of Charles's financial activities, matching it with the company and personal events he could find. Gloria would keep her eyes open at the hotel and report back with anything unusual. Before they left, David grew serious. "Gloria, I need to ask, are you sure you want to do this? Once we start pulling at this thread, we can't stop until it's out in the open. And Charles isn't the type to forgive." Gloria met his eyes. "I've been through worse. I've lost jobs, I've lost people I loved. I'm not afraid of losing his approval. He never valued me anyway. If what he's doing is wrong, I want it exposed." Over the next few days, Gloria stuck to her routine at the hotel, blending in with the other staff. But she paid closer attention to everything in Charles's suite. On Tuesday, while dusting his office desk, she noticed a manila envelope with "Confidential" written on the front. It was unsealed, and she glanced inside just long enough to see an invoice for a consulting fee paid to a company name she recognized from David's list. The amount was enormous, enough to buy a house outright. She didn't touch the paper again, but made a mental note of every detail: the company name, the date, the amount, even the way the signature looked at the bottom. On Thursday, she saw Charles, himself in the hallway, walking quickly with two men in suits. His face looked tense, his jaw tight. She caught a fragment of his conversation, something about keeping the board quiet and moving funds faster. It was vague, but it confirmed her sense that he was worried. That night, she called David instead of meeting in person. She gave him the details from the invoice and the overheard conversation. David's voice was steady, but she could hear the excitement beneath it. "That's exactly the kind of link we need. If we can prove that these payments are connected to fake companies, it's over for him." The plan was moving faster now. David had started contacting a few trusted colleagues, lawyers, and financial experts who could help verify the information without leaking it to the wrong people. Gloria felt both nervous and energized. For the first time in years, she wasn't just cleaning rooms. She was using the skills she thought she'd left behind forever. Meanwhile, in his luxurious penthouse, Charles was completely unaware of who was working against him. He saw Gloria only as a quiet maid who faded into the background. He had no idea that every time she dusted a shelf or straightened a stack of papers, she was also collecting pieces of a puzzle that could bring his empire crashing down. By the end of the week, David sent her another message. "I think we're almost there. One more strong connection, and we can take this public." Gloria put down her phone and took a deep breath. She knew that final piece could appear any day, and when it did, there would be no turning back. The week that followed was tense. Gloria woke up every morning with a quiet determination. She went through her usual routine at the hotel, making beds, cleaning bathrooms, and straightening rooms. To anyone watching, she seemed like the same polite, hard-working maid she had always been. But beneath her calm exterior, she was a storm of plans, observations, and careful calculations. Every movement she made in the hotel felt like a small chess piece being moved toward checkmate. She had learned long ago that patience was just as important as skill. A careless step could alert Charles or his staff, and she couldn't afford mistakes. So she kept her ears open and her eyes sharp. She paid attention to discarded envelopes, half-read reports, and papers left open on desks. One afternoon, while tidying his office, she noticed a thin booklet tucked under a pile of magazines. It looked like a financial summary of one of Charles's overseas projects. She couldn't pick it up, but she memorized the numbers: dates, amounts, company names, and the flow of money. Meanwhile, David was working tirelessly on the other end. His laptop was always open, his eyes scanning spreadsheets and documents, connecting dots Gloria had never even realized existed. Every call between them brought new excitement. Gloria relayed the details she remembered, and David checked public records, tax filings, and small legal reports. "Gloria, this is incredible," David said during one call. "All the offshore accounts match the names you saw. The payments, the timing, even the shell companies, they're all connected. This isn't just bad business. It's a clear pattern of fraud and evasion. If we publish this, it will shake his whole empire." Gloria smiled faintly, but she kept her voice calm. "I just remember what I see. You're the one turning it into proof." She spent the next few days walking a careful line. She continued to clean the penthouse, but she also looked for small details others might miss. She noticed Charles's assistant leaving a folder on the kitchen counter. The envelope was labeled with a project name Gloria recognized from David's research. She didn't touch it, but she memorized the key figures and dates. She also noticed that Charles had started acting differently. He was more tense, checking his phone frequently, speaking sharply to staff, and walking with a brisk, almost anxious pace. Gloria knew that her presence in his life was unnoticed, but every detail she observed was a thread she could give David. The next evening, they met again at the cafe. Gloria pulled out a small notebook and carefully wrote down the additional details she had remembered. David leaned over, eyes wide. "Gloria, this is the missing piece. It proves that the money went through multiple layers of shell companies. This is the evidence we need. I can cross-check it with the records I have, and it will be undeniable." Gloria felt a shiver of anticipation. They were closer than ever to exposing Charles's activities, but she also understood the risks. Charles was powerful and wealthy, and once he realized someone was uncovering his secrets, he would fight back. Back at the hotel, Gloria noticed that security around Charles's suite had increased. There were more cameras and an additional security guard posted near the elevators. It was a subtle change, but it confirmed that something had unsettled him. Gloria knew she had to be more careful. She began keeping her notes in code, a system only she and David could understand. Each number, each company name, each date was carefully written in a way that wouldn't make sense to anyone else. She also started observing patterns in Charles's meetings. She noticed that he frequently spoke with lawyers and financial advisors, often in hushed tones and behind closed doors. She couldn't hear the conversations, but the timing of these meetings often aligned with large, unexplained transfers in the documents she had memorized. One night, while cleaning the living room, she saw Charles pacing and muttering under his breath. She caught a fragment of a conversation with himself. "How did this leak? Everything should be secure." Gloria didn't react. She simply noted it in her mind. Charles was worried, but he didn't know the source. As the days passed, David began preparing a report. He wanted to make sure that when the story came out, it could not be denied or ignored. Gloria continued to feed him small pieces of information, each one helping to strengthen the case. She remembered every number, every signature, every company name. It was exhausting work, but the thought of seeing justice done kept her going. One afternoon, Charles held a board meeting at the hotel. Gloria cleaned the meeting room after it ended and noticed several papers left on the table. Among them were contracts and bank statements with transfers she recognized. She quickly memorized the details and called David afterward, providing him with the final connections he needed. "Gloria, you've done it," David said, his voice filled with admiration. "We have everything. Every account, every transfer, every shell company, it all links back to him. If this goes public, there's no way he can defend himself. His empire is finished." Gloria leaned back in her chair, letting the weight of their work sink in. She felt a mix of relief and nervousness. The next step was critical. They had to make sure the information was released in a way that was safe, legal, and undeniable. David explained his plan. He would submit the findings to a trusted media outlet with a clear, verifiable report, and they would wait for the story to break. The day the report was published, Gloria woke early and watched the news with a quiet intensity. The headline flashed across the screen, "Billionaire Charles Whitford accused of massive financial fraud." The story detailed every connection, every shell company, and every suspicious transfer. The reporters cited documents, expert analyses, and whistleblower information, all perfectly matching the evidence Gloria had helped gather. Across the city, Charles Whitford read the news in his penthouse. His face went pale. He had underestimated Gloria. He had believed she was worthless trash, incapable of understanding his business or threatening his empire. But now, the world was watching, and there was no way to deny the facts. Within hours, the effects were immediate. Banks froze accounts, investors demanded explanations, and board members began resigning. Charles made frantic phone calls, but the damage was already done. The network of shell companies and secret transfers had been exposed, and there was no way to hide. Gloria watched the news from her small apartment. She felt a quiet satisfaction. She hadn't done this for revenge. She had done it because she believed in truth and justice. Charles's words had hurt, but they had also sparked something in her, a determination to show her value not through his approval, but through her actions and knowledge. Over the next few days, the city buzzed with the story. News outlets followed every development, and people began to talk about the quiet maid who had helped uncover one of the largest fraud cases in recent history. Gloria's life had changed, though she kept her day-to-day routine mostly the same. She continued working at the hotel, but she was no longer invisible. Guests who had once overlooked her now offered smiles of recognition, and colleagues treated her with a new level of respect. David called her one evening, his voice full of admiration. "Gloria, you changed everything. You didn't just expose fraud. You proved that knowledge and courage matter more than money or status. The world should know what you've done." Gloria smiled. "I didn't do it alone. You helped turn my memories and observations into something real. But yes, I've learned that people can't underestimate you, no matter what they say. Not ever." As she hung up the phone, she looked out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance. She felt a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond money or recognition. She had turned a painful insult into a catalyst for justice. She had shown the world and herself what she was truly worth. And somewhere in his penthouse, Charles Whitford was learning a lesson he would never forget. Never underestimate someone who has both skill and courage, no matter how small they may seem. The morning after the story broke, Gloria woke up with a strange mix of calm and excitement. The city was alive with news of Charles Whitford's empire unraveling. People were talking about it everywhere, on buses, in cafes, and on television. Gloria made herself a simple breakfast, listening to the hum of the city outside her window, and thought about how much had changed in just a few days. At the hotel, she noticed a shift immediately. Staff members who had once ignored her or spoken, down to her now, gave her polite nods and smiles. Guests who had barely acknowledged her presence the week before now whispered and pointed as they passed. Gloria didn't let herself be distracted. She continued her duties as usual, making beds, cleaning rooms, and tidying halls, but inside she was quietly proud. She had played a key role in something that was shaking the city to its core. Meanwhile, Charles Whitford's world was collapsing. Bank accounts were frozen, investors were demanding answers, and lawyers were advising him to step down from key positions. Board members were resigning one by one, refusing to be associated with his companies. The public outrage was swift, and news outlets covered every detail relentlessly. Gloria received a call from David early in the afternoon. "Gloria, it's happening. Investors are pulling out, and regulators are opening investigations into all of his companies. This is bigger than we imagined. Charles Whitford's $2.4 billion empire is collapsing." Gloria listened quietly, letting the words sink in. "It feels strange," she said finally. "It's like watching a storm you helped create but from far away." David laughed softly. "You helped create it because you saw what no one else did. You noticed the details, remembered the numbers, and gave me the pieces I needed. Without you, this wouldn't have been possible." By mid-afternoon, Gloria decided to visit the cafe where she had first met David to think and reflect. The cafe was crowded, and the chatter of people talking about the scandal surrounded her. She found a small table in the corner, ordered a tea, and pulled out her notebook. She didn't need to write anything down this time. She just wanted to remember how far she had come. She thought back to the first time Charles had insulted her, calling her worthless trash. The words had stung deeply, but instead of breaking her, they had ignited a determination she didn't know she had. She realized that the insult, meant to diminish her, had actually revealed her true strength. She had taken the memory of that moment and turned it into action, showing that courage, intelligence, and persistence could topple even the most powerful people. As Gloria sat in the cafe, Her phone buzzed again. It was another message from David. They are calling him to meetings. He is panicking. Keep observing, but stay safe. Gloria smiled. She was careful, but she was no longer afraid. She had been careful all along, watching from the shadows, keeping track of details no one else noticed. Charles had underestimated her completely, and that had been his greatest mistake. Back at the hotel, the staff was buzzing with whispers about Charles. Some were afraid, unsure of what might happen next. Others were curious, watching as security guards seemed tense and executives hurried through the halls. Gloria continued to do her work quietly, but she couldn't help noticing the changes around her. The power dynamic had shifted. The man who had once ruled the hotel with fear and money was now faltering, and the quiet maid, who had always blended into the background, had become a key player in his downfall. By the evening, the news reached the national stage. Television channels reported on Charles Whitford's businesses being investigated, assets frozen, and lawsuits filed. Experts discussed the offshore accounts, the shell companies, and the fraudulent transfers. They praised the whistleblowers, who had brought the information to light. Gloria felt a mixture of pride and humility. She had never sought recognition, but she understood that her actions had real consequences, consequences that were making the world a more just place. The save. Next day, Charles attempted to respond. He held a press conference trying to defend himself, but his words sounded hollow. The evidence was overwhelming, and no one believed his excuses. Investors withdrew further, lawyers advised him to resign from every position, and regulators moved quickly to ensure no further damage could be done. It was clear. His empire was finished. Gloria watched all of this unfold from her small apartment. She felt a sense of closure, as if a long chapter in her life had finally ended. She thought about all the long hours of quiet observation, the careful memorization of details, and the trust she had placed in David. Everything had led to this moment. She realized that she had grown stronger, not just because of what she had accomplished, but because she had discovered her own resilience. Word began to spread about the maid who had helped expose Charles Whitford. Articles praised her intelligence, attention to detail, and bravery. They described how she had noticed patterns others had missed, remembered key financial details, and shared them with experts who could act on them. Gloria's story became a symbol of courage and quiet strength, inspiring people who had felt overlooked or underestimated to trust in their own abilities. In the weeks that followed, Charles Whitford faced legal consequences. He resigned from all his companies, and lawsuits were filed for fraud and financial misconduct. His reputation was ruined, and his empire, built over decades, crumbled in a matter of days. Gloria had watched it all with careful attention, proud that she had played a part in ensuring justice was served. One afternoon, David visited her at the hotel. He smiled warmly as they sat together with cups of tea. Gloria, the story is still being told. People everywhere are talking about what happened. You've shown that one person, even someone who seems invisible, can make a real difference. Gloria nodded. I didn't do it for the recognition. I did it because it was right. But it feels good to know that people see it now. David smiled. And they will. Your courage and intelligence are unforgettable. You didn't just destroy an empire. You reminded the world that everyone has value and no one should be underestimated. Gloria looked out the window at the city once more. She thought about how far she had come, from the insult that had wounded her to the action that had changed the course of one of the most powerful men in the country. She had turned a painful moment into a force for justice, showing that determination, intelligence, and courage could topple even the most formidable empires. In the end, Gloria didn't become rich or famous. She didn't need to. The knowledge that she had made a difference, that she had stood up for what was right, and that she had proven her worth to herself, was more than enough. Her life returned to its quiet rhythm, but she carried with her The pride of knowing that even someone in the shadows, doing simple work, could change the world. Charles Whitford, once untouchable, now faced the reality of his actions. He had built his wealth through cunning and manipulation, but he had underestimated the quiet strength of a woman he dismissed as unimportant. Gloria's courage and determination had shown that true power was not measured by money or status, but by the willingness to act with intelligence, integrity, and heart. As the city moved on, life continued. People remembered the fall of a billionaire and the courage of a maid who refused to be invisible. Gloria, meanwhile, continued her work, her steps light and her heart full, knowing that she had made the impossible possible. She had turned her pain into purpose, her observation into action, and her strength into justice. And somewhere in the penthouse, Charles Whitford was left to reckon with the truth, that the world had changed, and that even the smallest, quietest people could hold the power to bring giants to their knees. Gloria's story became a lasting reminder that courage, intelligence, and integrity could never be measured by wealth or status, and that true worth was something no one could ever take away.